Okay guys, in this video what we're going to be doing is covering subdivision modeling, giving you guys a really good example you can follow along to. So we're not going to make this tank, but we're going to do something similar-ish to it, but on an easier scale. Because again, if you look at all the details in here, there's quite a bit of stuff going on. So what we're going to actually use is this guy right here and kind of jazz it up a little bit so it's not this simple. So hopping into Modo, what I'm going to do is grab this image and throw it in my scene. Ideally, it'd probably be easier if you just had this image on a secondary monitor, but again, me recording on one screen makes it a little bit difficult. So I'll move this guy over to the side because ideally I'm not going to model on top of this image, I'm just going to use it as an inspiration. I'll also grab its transparency, knock it down, so it's not as obtrusive. But again, if we turn our wireframe on in our grid, we want our guy pretty much right at world center because again we're going to take advantage of having symmetry and all that stuff. So the first thing that I'm going to kind of worry about is let's just do this main chunk up here, so like the top of the turret. So again, if you're not as comfortable with modeling, you can go in and do that technique that I have talked about a million times, where we go in and kind of draw over this, cut it up, and kind of see where these lines are. It's not 100% needed because again we're just going for something in the vein of this and not this exactly. Let's just throw a cube in here and just kind of get going on this. Again, a lot of this stuff we already, techniques at least we covered in class. I'm just gonna, in a sense, combine these together and use them to kind of make something so you guys can see this in a sense from start to finish. Let's move this guy up. Actually don't want image all the way in the way, but again I want it close enough where I can see what's going on. So something like this. So now I'm just going to kind of interpret where these cuts are going and kind of go from here. So again we have it narrower right here, wider in the back. It looks like there's a chamfer on the back here, not as big a one here. Potentially have a cut going through here that would pretty much send it all the way across, and then kind of some stuff going on here. So let's just go ahead and make that initial cut going through the middle. Set our count to 1, call that good. We'll make this a little bit easier. I'll just throw this behind our tank a little bit and turn on our wireframe. So from here, let's get the general form of this, to widen it out, stretch it down. And now what I'm going to do is just go ahead right now and turn on our subdivision, see what we get. So hold shift, hit tab. So as expected, it's a little bit overly rounded out, not a big deal. So I'm going to constantly be turning this tab, hitting the shift tab to turn the Catmull-Clark subdivision on and off quite a bit. So let's just get a little bit more geo going on this. So extrude, pull it out, scale this guy down, scale it in a little bit. Let's look at what's going on over here. Let's have another loop coming through here. Actually, widen this out a little bit, something like that. And then looking at it from the front, let's just grab this top turret and scale it in a little bit. So something like that. And let's kind of get this little bevel in the back here and right here. And then from here, this will probably be good enough as far as our initial geometry. So actually, instead of beveling that, actually let's just do it just so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to do a bevel of 1 on here, make it pulled out about as far as this one is. Again, this is going to create an n-gon, I'll address that later. Same thing here, bevel, but a little bit more subtle. Now I'm just going to connect, because we have an n-gon here and an n-gon here. Turn our wireframe off. I'm going to connect from this vertice all the way up to this guy. So slice tool, have multi-slice turned on. Make sure that's at 100%. Make sure that's at 100%, and it cuts through just fine. Do the same thing on this side. And ideally, if we wanted to, we could have had our symmetry on, but realistically I can just scale those guys in, and now that I know it's 100% symmetrical. That being said, I'll actually just throw in a symmetry line, hit uniform on that. So now we know that this guy, at any time if we need to resymmetrize it, we just delete 1/2, Shift V, hit apply, it mirrors back over. So again, hold Shift, hit Tab. Now let's kind of get in the meat and potatoes of how we're going to angle this. So again, we kind of have edges along here that are going to be hard, so let's just go ahead and turn symmetry on the X on, just right up here. So I'll grab this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and just going through and systematically grabbing the edges that I want to be a little bit harder. So let's call this good for now, so Shift Tab. Now I want to kind of give these guys weight, so I can hit Shift W, that's going to give us our Vertex Map Weight. And again, if you don't like hotkeys, you have Vertex Map right here, Weight tool right here, again right there it says Shift W. So now it's usually going to be set at 0 at first, so left click and start dragging right, and it's slowly going to harden that. So depending again on your subdivision level, so right here it's just slightly hard. Turn the wireframe off, so now right here it shows a hard edge. So if I want that to be a little bit softer, I can grab my mesh here, go down to the surface properties. Our Capmel-Clark subdivision is the one we're working with, so from 2 you can bump that up to 3 and you see it gets a lot softer. But again, notice down here we're at 5,000. If I was to knock that back down to 2, now we're at 1,200. So again, popping this up to 3 is going to make your kind of unbeveled edges a little bit rounder. But again, it just depends on the look that you're going for with this. So the other thing you can do that I actually didn't do, so let's hit undo a few times so we get that selection set back. I don't want to kind of have to select this again, so I'm just going to right click, add to selection set, and just name this turret edges, something like that. It's set to add, so it adds it to that selection set I'm just creating. Hit OK. Now I can go in here, go back to my surface, pop this up to 3, it's a little bit rounder, and then if I want to get all those edges back at any time, right click, recall selection set. This drop down I only have the one that I made, so turrets, OK, turret edges. Now I can harden or soften that. So let's turn our wireframe on again, hit tab to turn this off. So now I just want to kind of determine where I want these little chiseled edges. So let's do these. Go right here. And let's do this one going back to here as well. And I'll switch to vertices real quick. I don't really know what's going on here, so let's just pull this back just because I feel like it and make this guy a hard edge too. So hold Shift, hit Tab. We're back in our hard edge mode. Shift W, edge weights, and now I can give these guys a little bit more or less weight. So let's put it at around 17%. Turn the wireframe off and look at that and say, okay, I like how that's looking. Again, at any time, if you want to see what your wireframe would look like if you flattened this, go up to geometry, hit freeze, hit OK, and it'll turn that into hard geometry. Oops. So one thing that again you might notice is this edge is a little bit harder than this edge, even though they're set to the same weight. And again, the reasoning behind that is you have an edge right here that's really, really close. So what we can do is kind of move that edge away a little bit, but realistically, shifting the tab, you can grab this edge, Shift W, and just knock down its softness, or its edge weight, but so about 10, 9%, whatever. And get that looking however we want it to look. So same thing with this edge. Let's pop up how hard this guy is as well. And again, we could probably call this good. Again, I could sit here and noodle this all day. It just depends on the look that you're going for. So let's do something like that. So I'm going to call this turret piece good. So now we need a little sphere for the top. So again, I could grab this little shape, turn it into a sphere. It'd be six-sided. But instead of doing that, let's just grab new mesh and just actually make a sphere. So again, I'm going to stay away from the globe. I'm going to actually do a quad ball instead. Turn wireframe on. And then this guy's subdivision level, in a sense, I'm just going to increase it to 3 or so and work with this. So let's middle mouse click lasso select to cut away that bottom. Shrink this. Now I want to close this hole. Again, I have symmetry turned on, so I'm going to turn symmetry off. Edge extrude, scale that in, and do that just a couple times because I just want to have a couple loops around here to preserve some stuff. Set tab to turn this off. So this is the edge that I want to have some amount of hardness to, so shift tab, shift V, and now I can control how hard or soft this edge is. So let's put it around there, so 12%. And again, since I made this in a new mesh, this new mesh's subdivision level is going to be 2, whereas if I hit on this cube, subdivision level is 3. Again, you have kind of infinite control over what pieces have what subdivision levels. So let's scale this in, look at our reference, and throw it right into place. So something like that. Not a big deal. So just for fun, let's say maybe we want to have this hatch so it opens up and we want to have a hole right here. Let's go back to this guy. So what I'm going to do is let's just leave subdivisions on, do an extrude. It does this kind of weird function because again this polygon is sitting. If I was to turn subdivision off, let's just do that real quick. Turn subdivision off. This polygon is sitting directly on top of where the other one was. So if I was to grab this and scale it in, you can see these polygons were just kind of sitting on top. So again, be mindful of when you're extruding and whatnot. Let's scale this in, scale it out. So now what I want to do is make this little chunk round. So what I can do is take advantage of, on the deform tab, we have radial. So left click, right click, turns this into a circle. You can extrude this, pull it down. Now let's hold shift and hit tab and see what this looks like. So again, it inherited, when I scaled this in, these edges inherited this, its parent edge. What the kind of hardness was, these edges were a little bit softer and they got inherited here. So I want these all to have the same amount of weight. So let's just go ahead and select all 12 of these guys. Shift W, crank it up. So again, this is kind of its highest level. It's the edge is all the way hard. So we'll get to that all the way hard and then just back off a little bit. So somewhere around right there, hit spacebar. Now this right here is a quad, this is a quad. So again, if I turn the wireframe off, oops, turn off and on, you might be able to see a little bit of a pinching right here. So you can see how this comes out and then kind of bubbles up and then comes over. So if you don't like that, what you can do to get rid of this, just grab this edge, extrude it, scale it in, and then call it good, because now it just has kind of a perfect loop. It's not, when it turns into a quad here, it's not a big deal. And again, with subdivision modeling, poly count's not a huge deal, but if you wanted to do a join average on this, you definitely could. So let's unhide this mesh, and again, I have it to where my inactive mesh, so let's actually name these. Turret door, just call this turret. So now if I have both of these visible, the turret door is the inactive mesh. The wireframe, you might be able to tell, is a little bit darker. So hit the O key and hit inactive mesh. It's set to default, so the shading style is the same. Normally this is going to be set to wireframe, but again, I want to see all my stuff at the same time. So just for this project, I'm temporarily going to have that set like that, just so I can kind of see everything that's going on at once. So again, let's go ahead and jump into this barrel. I'm going to do the same process as I did for the hole here. So extrude in, scale down, grab corresponding edges here, deform radial, scale this in a little bit more. Now I can do my extrude, pull it back, So this inherited the hardness here. I'm pretty sure that it all has the same value, but just to be sure, I'll go ahead. Select those, Shift W, set it to about 20%, and call it good. Now I can throw a cylinder in here. Again, this one I'll just make a new shape. So let's hit N for new mesh. Name this gun or the barrel, whatever you want to name it. And again, since this is a subdivision mesh, I don't need to have a crazy amount of edges. So let's just set this to 12, segments to 1, right click. And this is what we got. Let's just double check. Going all the way around, we have 12 edges. So you can middle mouse click with control held down to snap that to 90 degrees. Scale this in and throw it up in place. And let's not make it too long. And then hold Shift, hit Tab on it. Again, it's going to ruin our shape essentially, so we want to grab this edge, Shift W, increase that weight amount. Again, you're going to get this kind of weird scenario, so this is, should just turn these meshes off. I want to actually extrude this shape in, so extrude both of these at the same time, scale them down. You can see it already kind of fixed it. Extrude them again, do a join average on this one, join average on this one, and again, I'm kind of getting this hard edge here, so if I was to increase this smoothness to 3, you're going to see it's going to kind of take care of that. But realistically, let's leave that at that. Look at the wireframe. I have a really long polygon here, so let's divide this in 2, scale it out. Don't want to scale it too much, because again, if I start scaling it like this, if I was to turn the scaling off, you can see that again, stuff gets exaggerated. So let's turn that smoothing off, scale this out to where these are closer to the edge, somewhere around there. Shift W after I select these, and we can soften this or harden it however much we want. So now we need the little hole in there, so that's just as easy as grabbing this front piece, extruding it in. It'll inherit those settings. So again, if I want to manually change these, make them harder, softer, I can do that. So this one, I'll actually go ahead and bump that one up to 3. And again, this, realistically, that toy, that's not going to have the cannon go all the way back, so just having it recessed a little bit will be fine for this. So turn our wireframe back on. Again, getting used to hotkeys is going to save you guys quite a bit of time. Let's go to the front view, line these up a little bit better, scale them up, and now it's just kind of plunked right in that hole. So let's go ahead and take a look at the body real quick. So again, I'm going to kind of grab the main part of this body, worry about the wheels separate, worry about this little apparatus setup. We'll probably swap that out, change it a little bit. This guy in the back is just a cylinder, and these guys are, in a sense, if I zoom in on this, just boxes, but the top's a little bit more rounded. So actually looking at this, mine isn't really quite as tall as this one. So what I'm going to do is just grab this from the side, grab these polygons, pull them up a little bit. Actually, let's grab all of this scenario. Grab these bottom ones, pull it down a little bit just to make that look a little bit more chunky. But again, this doesn't have to be perfect at all. So we have all of our stuff named, so let's make a new mesh. Name this guy base or hull or whatever you want to name it. Just throw a box in here. So again, to throw a default 1 meter by 1 meter cube inside of the current mesh you have selected, if you hold Control, click on that, it'll just throw right in that same mesh. So let's, again, we only have this 3/4 view to go off of, so let's kind of size up how wide and tall we want this tank. Let's actually do this quick little extrude as well. So bring him up to here. Now let's eyeball this, just kind of see where we want it. On the bottom, if I zoom in, you can see this kind of carves in as well. So let's do another little extrude. pull this down, have our wireframe on. Scale this in a little bit, scale it in that way, and it's middle mouse select, move this up a little bit. So right around there is where I'm okay with this guy's body being. So let's look at this and see. So the width here, it pretty much comes in probably past this, so this edge kind of right here on the turret is a little bit farther out than this edge right here. So look at that from the front. So actually right where I have it is probably fine. And let's see the front and back. Let's actually move this up a little bit so we can have this turret is kind of sitting back farther on this. So again, we have a little bit more room up here than back here. And this should be good. So again, this guy, I could probably, let's zoom in on this and see if there's any, no, there's not really anything fancy with this. So this is actually probably fine as far as the geo for this. So Shift Tab, Shift W, make it a little bit harder. Let's just set it to 19% at first. Let's get that symmetry line in there. And just to have kind of evenly shaped polygons, let's divide it up 2 or 3 times right here. So this would actually, I'm going to take a few steps back, show you guys a quick trick. So ideally, these are all the edges that I'm going to be making hard or soft. So let's grab those, right click, do add to selection set, name this, oh, what do I call this, the base, edges, hit OK. Now when I actually go through and I do this cut and the one going through the side, pop that up to 2. If I want to grab those edges again and kind of reset that vertex weight, I can do recall selection set, base edges, hit OK. And now even though I added kind of these cuts in there, I can still just access the other ones really, really easily. So Shift W, smooth that out a little bit. So somewhere in there. And let's get this one and bump it up to subdivision level 3. That gives me a little bit more to work with. So I'm going to grab those edges again. So recall selection set, base edges, Shift W, tighten those up just a little bit. Now let's turn that off and see what we got. So okay, now this is looking pretty smooth and okay. So before we get to the wheels, I want to have like this little plug that would go in here. So to do this, let's turn the base off and look at the turret first. So we'll have this come from, let's, just like the top hole that we did. If I move this over to the right, I guess. Same scenario, just on the bottom, and it'll be kind of a plug coming out as opposed to a hole going in. So grab this, extrude, actually don't move it down yet, kind of pull it in, and now Shift Tab to turn our division off. Grab this, make it round, so again, deform, radial, right click. I have the round peg that I need, I can scale it up a little bit more, call it good from there. Now extrude, pull it down. So this peg, I should have enough with this edge right here and this edge going around to actually make this a hard edge. So Shift Tab, grab all these. Probably won't save the selection set on these guys, but again, if you want to, it could save time if you ever needed to select them again. So Shift W, that's currently set to 26%, so let's make it a little bit softer. So again, just because how this quad is, it's making that weird bubble up. So again, we already figured out how to solve this. Extrude this in, scale it in, join average, you're good to go. So this is probably fine for this peg shape. So now we want kind of the opposite peg shape in the bottom. So let's just copy new mesh, so N for new mesh, oops, paste. So let's turn the turret off and look at the base here. So now we have this little guy, so I'll just name this plug ref for reference. I'm not going to actually keep this mesh. Let's edit its color, turn it to red so I know to delete it later. And go back to our base. So now this one, I'll actually just use these set of vertices, or these set of polygons, which will correlate to these 8 edges. So again, the top piece was a 6-sided circle that got kind of rounded. Now we're going to do an 8-sided one. It doesn't really matter because both of these are going to be turned into circles. So let's extrude, pull that in, grab these edges, radial, right click. Again, depending on how hard or soft your edges are, that might look a little bit weird at first here because of the smoothing that we put on these vertices. Let's go to the top view, line this up. Oops, I'm going to move that straight down. Line this up a little bit better. And again, we want the hole for this plug to be a little bit bigger than the actual plug. So extrude, pull down. These, let's turn this off so I can see. So these meet up to one point, but again, they have these corners right here. So it's a 1, 2, 3-sided edge. So again, it'll deform a little funny. So let's extrude that, pull it in, join average. Now we have a 4-sided edge where these are at. That should make our life a little bit easier. So let's grab these edges all the way around, grab these edges all the way around. Shift W, clunk. Now we have our hole. So let's turn our plug reference back on, go to the top view. Let's just take a look at this. Shift up arrow. So yeah, our plug is sitting just a little bit smaller than our hole is. So if we were to 3D print this, it would plug in. Again, when you 3D print stuff, that's its own kind of bag of worms that you'd have to get into. But having a little bit more space is sometimes better. But again, you can always sand off or use a Dremel with a sanding tool on it to get rid of extra plastic or resin. But again, the more you print stuff, the more you'll get the hang of how to connect things. So we can get rid of this plug reference. So let's kind of turn all of our tools on and see what we have going. Oops. So we got the turret door, the gun, the base, and the turret. The base fits right into here. We know that it'll fit. So the wheels are going to be really easy, as well as this big cylinder on the back. I probably won't even do that because again, it's just a cylinder. So again, we'll just do a 12-sided wheel again, or 12-sided cylinder. Rotate it down. Scale this in. Again, I want to make sure that the first wheel that I make is kind of rock solid as far as the smoothing goes on it, because then I'll duplicate that and the smoothing will transfer. Just a little bit wider. So this is something I can kind of look at this from the front and judge how far over out whatever these little treads need to be. So let's do something like this. Keep them away from the body because this will all be empty dead space. And then I can just move this up and see where it aligns with the body. Just have it close but not quite touching. Move it back down. And now I'm just kind of eyeballing it. Where is this flat edge compared to the top of the wheels? So this edge is down a little bit from the wheels right here. So again, the same edge right here coming down to the top of the wheel right here. So this is that same gap. So let's just go ahead and extrude these out. Extrude them one more time. Do join average. Let's get a little bit better of a wheel going. Grab these edges at first. And again, I can hit 3 to switch to polygons. It's going to remember that those edges are selected. Shift tab, and then go back to my edges. So 2 are edges up here. Shift W. Now I can make those hard or soft. And then I can increase or decrease the size of this. So something like that. Now let's do a linear clone. So under duplicate, there's clone right here. I just have it set to a hotkey, which isn't by default. We want 3 of these babies, so they're all face apart. Actually, 1, 2, 3, 4. I can count. There we go. So something like this. They're almost touching, but not quite. Grab, grab, grab. Grab all of them. Move them back. Ready to go. Shift V. Sends them over to this side. So again, now all we need to worry about is the kind of fender on the top. So with this, I'm actually going to switch it up a little bit and show you guys a new little trick-ish that might help you out with some other stuff. But instead of making these little fender things go down into here, what I'm going to do is show you guys a quick way to make something like this. So you have a little turret that's made and have this, in a sense, go around our objects. You have like a bunch of little tread pieces. So real quick, to make this fender, I don't want to really start from scratch. So I'm just going to grab this edge, duplicate it out. I have my duplicates, my clones set to 3, change that to 1, and this will be fine as far as our starting geo. Scale this down, pull this out, and then again we'll have let's turn our smoothing off real quick and go to our left side. Have something like this going. There we go. Let's do the same thing on the back. And again, I am going kind of fast with this. You can definitely pause it at any time. I'm not trying to trick you guys. I'm just trying to get through this at roughly the rate that I'd be modeling it. So again, trying to pay attention to hotkeys, saying, okay, what's the fastest way to select A, B, or C thing that I need selected? And then again, working from all angles so you don't have kind of one angle that outshines another angle. So something like that, we'll call it good. I just want to do quick Shift H. Let's actually turn these guys off. And I want to grab, actually let's see. Okay, this wasn't bridge, so let's do that real quick. So here's a quick example. I want to go through and select every one of these edges like this. I can't really grab all of them because it grabs ones that I don't really need. So what I'm going to do is actually do this in a weird way where I'm just going to grab all of them and now deselect the handful of ones that I don't need. So again, it's a much quicker than going through and trying to grab these one at a time just to exclude this loop and this loop. So again, grab all of them, hold Control, middle mouse drag, and then I have the selection set that I want. Shift Tab, Shift W, set the smoothing wherever I want it, so somewhere in there. Now let's see, we have this turret in the same mesh as our base, which that's fine. Let's go to the turret. Our wheels are actually in the same mesh as the turret. So let's give these guys their own mesh. So Shift X, N for new mesh, Shift V. Now these guys they default to that subdivision level 2, so I'm going to crank that up to 3 so I get that roundness back. Another thing you can do would be, if I wanted to kind of jazz these wheels up a little bit, I could do a quick extrude, kind of do a handful of these, something like that. Oh, that should work just fine. So if I turn Tab off, I can grab these little inner wheels, Shift Tab, Shift W, make those just as hard. Now I have a little bit more going on with these wheels than just flat wheels. So let's go ahead and delete these. And again, it's not a big deal if you go through, delete stuff, remodel stuff. It's just kind of the normal working flow. So something like that. Grab all these, Shift V, send them over. We're good to go. If I wanted to, I could do the insides of these, not a big deal, but we'll call this good. So let's select this guy, Shift V, send him over, and turn our gun and our turret back on. So I'm just really quickly going to reorganize these meshes so they're kind of bottom to top. So turret door, I want the turret under that, then the gun, then the base. Oh, actually, I have the wheels and this guy, so I'll just name this wheels. And then the base, there we go. Something like that. And let's actually grab both of these. Oops, come on, polygon mode, and move these up a little bit. There we go. So now what we're going to do is, in a sense, make this little track here. Again, this isn't something that I'd want to model every one of these out a million times in a row. What I'm going to want to do is model one and clone it along what we're going to make as a curve, and then we can adjust that later really quickly make changes to stuff and kind of dynamically work, as opposed to kind of getting stuck after the first time we kind of make and place something. So what I'm going to do is actually hit the O key, inactive mesh. I actually want set back to wireframe. I want to see what I'm doing here. Let's go to this side view, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a curve. So let's make a new mesh, and we'll just name this mesh curve ref. It's going to be our reference curve that we use. And then over here, normally this guy's set to pen. If you hold it, click and hold, you get this guy curve. You can, if you like different types of curves, you can definitely play with those. We'll just do the normal one for right now. So what I'm going to do is put down points. So you can see that it's already starting to round off areas. So I'm kind of just giving 1 point for each one of these wheels. Now from here to here, I don't want to click to try to connect this. Down here, there's a little guy called closed curve. So now I can go in and click and move these in a way where this kind of lines up a little bit better. So something like this. And again, this doesn't have to be 100% perfect by any means. But if I wanted to add a new point, let's say I have this one that I moved last, it's going to be yellow, whereas all the other ones are cyan. If I click up here, for instance, what it's going to do is it's going to say this was the point you had selected. I'm going to put a point after that point, but between the next point, because again, I went around counterclockwise. So again, if I wanted to add another point down here, I'd left click to select this guy, and then left click right here, and it would give me another point. But ideally, having 1 point on each one of these should be fine. And again, I'm not super picky about this being a straight line all the way across, because again, it is a bunch of going to be a bunch of little pieces kind of on a track. So again, sometimes tanks have a little sag. So if I wanted to, I could even grab this piece and intentionally put a little sag right here. Grab this one, put a little sag right here. It just depends on the look that I'm going for. Let's line these up a little bit better. And call this good. So now I'm just going to hit the spacebar, and now I have this curve here and I can work with it. So now what I need is a reference mesh to kind of instance around this curve, because again, with the curve where it currently sits, let's tweak that a little bit more. It's just a curve that won't render, it won't really do anything. So again, if you need to tweak the curve, you just click on the mesh that the curve's in, left click, oops, with item mode selected, left click on the curve, and then you can switch to vertices and kind of move those around wherever you want. Again, if you're just in vertice mode and the mesh is selected, you can just middle mouse and grab any one of these curves at any time and move it wherever you need it to go. So that curve can be edited anytime afterwards. So what we're going to do is, let's open up this guy real quick. We're just going to make one of these little tracks. Again, we won't make it this detailed. And what I'm going to want to do is have this track that I make actually at 0, 0. I'm not going to model one that's kind of offset and where it should be over here. Because again, we want this guy to be kind of at this 0, 0 mark. Let's just drop in a box in a new mesh. So N for new mesh. And we'll call this track underscore piece. So we'll drop a box. And now I'm just going to scale this down, scale it in, go to the front view, look at how wide this needs to be. So scale that in a little bit, somewhere around there. Oops. Let's just eyeball that again a little bit more narrow. Right about there. Let's look at it in 3D. We want to have it kind of skinny and flat, like so. A little bit more flat somewhere in there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, let's hide all this stuff so we can just see the important things that are happening here. And the wheels. Why not? So we have this curve that's in black right here. We have this little cube right here. What I'm going to do is populate this curve around, or populate this box around this curve, and do this in a dynamic way that we can kind of change some stuff. So I'll kind of go over that as we're doing it. So over here under duplicate, you have curve clone. So I don't want to just duplicate it. I want to hold this button down and now I get a bunch of other buttons. I want this little guy called curve instance. So I have our track piece selected. Curve instance is selected. So now I'm just going to left click in the viewport, and now it's going to give me all these little guys that are showing me where these cubes would be if I was to kind of finalize this. So right now you can see, let's just go to a side view so it's a little bit easier. You can see they're kind of bunched up around the edges here and spaced really far apart here. I don't want to place these by hand, it would take forever. So what we're going to do is, again, ideally you want this little guy set to closed, because again we want a closed loop overall, not super important. But let's look at some of these other guys. Align to normal, let's see what that does. Click that. Oh, they all rotate in a funny way. So obviously we don't want that. So again, none of these buttons are really going to destroy anything because we're not like confirming that we want this. So the one that we want realistically down here is this little guy called by length. So now what you can see is the spacing in between every one of these is a little bit more even. So before, these guys are touching, these guys are overlapping, these guys have huge spaces. Hit by length, and now the distance between these is all going to be the same. So now right here I have steps. That's the number of these little guys that I have made. So let's select this and increase it. So let's just guess and say, let's see what happens when I do 30. So the gaps are still a little big. I want to kind of reduce those. So let's try 40. Okay, now there's a little bit too much overlap. So let's knock this down by a little bit, 36. Okay, these are spaced apart. They're, in a sense, kind of floating right here. Not a really big deal, but we'll call this good. So I'm just going to hit the space bar. I dropped that tool, and now over here you can see these got created. These little guys, it's all geometry, but it's an instanced geometry. So again, we still have our main kind of piece right here, but then these are all instances of that piece. So the powerful thing with this is, I'm actually going to save real quick, so if it crashes, I'm not doomed. If I make a modeling change to this master piece right here, so let's grab our track piece, our master one, grab this, make it thicker, all these other ones are going to get thicker. So now what we can do is say, okay, I want to have a little bit of detail on this. Let's do a loop slice. Let's do a slice through the middle. Turn the count down to 2. Now let's grab this little portion right here, do an extrude, and pull it out. So effectively what I just did was, if I can see kind of what's going on with the wireframe here, I can pull this out, so this, when I can see all these, so make them viewable, hold shift, grab all of them. Now I have this little chunk right here that kind of connects all of these pieces together. So again, right here, this piece is plugging into that piece, this piece is plugging into that piece through this piece. So now in a sense, all these pieces are one. Again, they're separate islands, they're even separate meshes over here that are instances of the mesh. But again, I can also go over here, let's say I want to switch my action center here to local. Let's grab this top one here, these bottom ones here, and then later we can do these ones. And realistically what I'm going to do is an extrude, a scale in, and then a scale down. But I want to do these kind of more than just one at a time. So let's do these ones and these ones all at the same time. So extrude, local is on up here, scale all these in, something like this. Drop the tool, extrude. Now let's move up in the blue so it kind of gives this guy a little chunk here. So let's do the same one with this. Extrude, scale in, kind of tweak this a little bit, maybe even make this one a little bit more narrow, doesn't really matter, you can kind of have fun with this. Extrude and move down. Oops, that's moving up, so I want to go the other way. So let's go ahead and grab all these instances here, just because they're kind of getting in the way. Grab the top one, hold shift, grab the bottom one. Now I want to group these together, so Control G. Now I have this little group locator. If I open up this folder, all our instances are in there, out of the way. So let's, oops, I don't want to rename this. Let's just turn those off for now. I know they're in there, I know they're fine. So now I want to do my subdivision modeling on this guy. So let's turn our grid off, Shift Tab, everything's kind of wrecked. So let's grab these faces, hold Shift, hit the up arrow. Now I want the corresponding edges, so hold the Alt key, press 2 on the keyboard, or again, as soon as I hit Alt up here, it says convert, so I want to convert my selection to edges. Now I have these, Shift W, set my smoothing on this however I want. And let's actually do Shift up arrow one more time. There we go. So something like that. Now I can go ahead, hit Tab. Now I'm just going to grab these remaining edges, so something like this. And there might be a faster way to grab all these. I'm potentially doing it the hard way. But either way, it gets the job done. So this, I think, oh, I don't want that one. Let's just double check this. So again, Shift W after we smooth it. Now we can make this as hard or soft as we want. Let's actually grab these edges as well. There we go. So Shift W, re-get that smoothing going. Let's actually take the surface here, set this up to 3. Again, if your computer is kind of hating you right now, you might not want to go this high in subdivisions, because again, this one piece right now is at 9,000. So let's save this. So nothing bad will happen. Shift Tab, so we turn this off. So now this one piece right here is 148 tries. So let's turn on our group locator for our instances. Now on this guy, if we hold Shift and hit Tab, all these other ones are going to be smooth. So again, Tab off, Tab on, Tab off, Tab on. And our count over here, since these are instanced, it's not active geo in our scene, but if I was to flatten these and turn them into geo, we're going to get pretty much 10,000 tries times almost 40 different treads. So it gets kind of messy kind of fast. So let's turn our subdivision off. We'll just leave that off for right now. And let's actually turn all of our subtools back on. Now we're going to get this guy into place. So getting these into place again, really easy. What we're going to do is just grab this geometry. And again, this is just the geometry of our track plate, our reference one. So let's rename him track piece or whatever, master. Go to the front view. Now I just want to line this up with the wheels somewhere in there. Now I'm going to hold Shift, hit V, mirror him over, and it's going to mirror all of the instances over as well. Because technically what this is doing is, this is the geo in the scene, these guys right here, and it's mirroring around, or instancing all the other ones around this curve right here, but it's doing it with this offset that I just gave it, and then I mirrored it, so it's doing it with an offset this way and an offset this way, so it's kind of doing it twice. So again, if your computer is a little chuggy with these, usually instances are a lot lighter than actual geo. You can turn those off, or again, you don't have to make the geo on these as complicated. So now let's go ahead and look at everything we got. And let's actually, oops, do a little bit of organizing. So track instance, move him up. Oops, I don't want him a child of that. So right there. So now I'm going to hold Shift, click up here. So this is, I have all these kind of active. If that's a little slow on your computer, again, you can have it to where your inactive meshes are the same as your active ones, and now you get a thing like this. So now I can go ahead, select these, and adjust them as need be. So the height's fine, I think. Let's grab this, turn our action center back to none. Pull that in so it just meets that profile a little bit better. Pull that in so it meets the profile a little bit better. Unhide. Now let's look at this, and again, I know that this little guy is sitting here, but he won't be sitting there forever. So something like this. And again, from here, I'll call this good. You can definitely take the time to throw those little guys on the front. Same thing with this little guy in the back. It's not that much more adding to it. But again, realistically, when you're done, you should have a tank something like this. So let's go over the process of turning this instance geometry into usable geometry. So let's do a file save as. We'll name this tank underscore subd. Oops. Restart. Instanced. And oops. Just throw this on the desktop right now. And now we'll do another save as. Call this flattened. So now what I'm going to do is let's turn all this stuff off. Go to our track master here, grab him, grab these polygons, shift tab. You see all the other ones get smooth as well. Now I'm actually going to go in, click on this very top instance, hold shift, click on the bottom one, and I'm going to change these types. So if I right click, I can do change type, and I want to change it to a mesh item, so it's going to lose that instance ability. Now all these change to blue boxes. Again, down here my try count now is 70,000, so again this is really, really high poly object. Our track master now are these two pieces, and now if I move these, rotate them, scale them, this track that's going around here got flattened, so it doesn't really behave, it doesn't get controlled by this master anymore, so I can just go ahead and delete that out. Now what I'm actually going to do, instead of having track piece 15 through 30 or whatever is down here, I'm going to grab all this geo, Control X, Control V, copy and paste it. It gets thrown into this top mesh. Can grab all these empty ones now, right click, delete. So we'll just call this track now because it's no longer a piece of the track, it's the full track. Close this out. Turn on all of our individual pieces. We don't really need the curve anymore, so this reference curve, we can go ahead and delete him out. And from here, again, you could detail this out, put a bunch of little bolts on right here. But at this point, again, this is a subdivided mesh, so again, I won't be able to view what you did, in a sense, in 3D, because again, these edges that I made hard or soft aren't going to transfer in an FBX. So what you're going to want to do is flatten all this stuff. So to do this, we'll just do it one piece at a time. So this turret door, this top piece, have him selected. Our surface over here is set to the subdivision level that we want. Do geometry, dun 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 dun, freeze. We'll leave all these to default, hit OK. Grab this next piece, it's going to be the turret. And again, its subdivision is set to 3, so let's actually knock this down. Let's leave it at 3. I'll tell you guys why to not have that in a sec. Just freeze all these pieces, so freeze this one, go down to the gun, geometry freeze, OK, go to the base, just go through these pieces one at a time. And these track pieces are by far the heaviest ones, so let's actually make these just be a subdivision level of 2, just so this is a little bit lighter. So geometry freeze, OK, you can see after a while wireframe, now we have a really intense wireframe. So now I can do a file save as, go down, make this an FBX, and have this tank sub D underscore my name, whatever, save this out. And chances are that should be good. So do you want to save all the stuff? Yes, hit save. So you might get a warning if you're using the Steam version of Modo, and it's going to say that you've exceeded your polygon limit. You can't, in a sense, save this. So what you can do in that case is kind of save these pieces out one at a time. So in a sense, I would just have this turret door, Control N, so I have a new scene. The turret door is really not that much, so I could probably combine the turret door, the turret, and the gun whatever it is. Turn these other ones off, see what that is for poly count. So that's only 25,000. So let's check real quick. So bringing up the Steam site, we have the differences between Modo Indie and full Modo. So you guys have to be really wary of this right here. OBJ and FBX export limit set to 100,000 polygons. So let's break mine down, and I'll just show you how I would do it. So let's view everything. So mine's 300,000 polygons. So let's turn all these meshes off and just see what this is. So that's good. Let's add the wheels to the list. Okay, that's too high. So if I select the base through the turret door, including the turret, I'm at 38,000. So I could grab all these meshes, pull them down into this new scene, clear out this empty one, and do save as subd_tank my name _01. So this is the first piece of my tank. Save that out as a 2013 FBX. Hit save. That one's good to go. Now let's look at this. So we got the turret door, so we can just delete him for now. The turret, the gun, and the base. The wheels were a little bit high, so let's look at just those. Okay, these are 104,000. So what we can do with this is I could just do Control X, new mesh, Control V. So now I have the left wheels and the right wheels, so I could save those out as independent OBJs, or FBXs, I'm sorry. So wheels 02, drag this down. This is just, actually we'll just make a new dummy scene. So Control N, get wheels 1, drag this down, save as. We're gonna do where's the FBX? Tank underscore whatever my name 02. Save this as FBX. Hit save. Close this out. Do the same thing with this guy. Again, you guys can probably see where this is going. But again, some people aren't aware of this process, so I just want to kind of do it one thing at a time. So this is going to be tank subd my name 03, hit save, close this out. So the wheels are set. So let's look at the track. So again, the track's at 170,000, so I could do that same process here, have a left side and a right side, save those out as two separate FBXs. I know it's kind of annoying, but that's just the process you have to work with when working with Modo Indie with really, really high poly counts. So again, if your tank's not that high, you did your subdivision levels at 2 instead of 3, again, you won't have as round of corners like this. It'll be something more like this. But again, you'll still be able to export more of that at one time. And then when I go to open your file, I'll just grab the list of tank underscore my name 1, 2, 3 scenario, open them all up at one time, and import those all into one file. So popping back into Modo real quick. Let's turn on, so all these meshes I could see. So again, something like this is going to be fine for this assignment. Again, we didn't have time to do crazy amount of details, but again, I didn't want to have a really long video. But again, this is something that if you did this technique, had more details in here, you could use this as a high poly as opposed to like a sculpt in ZBrush, let's say. And then if you were in the game art class last semester, you could use this to bake your normal maps, do fancy things and whatnot, and kind of go from there. But realistically, just having a tank like this for this project, you're going to be all set. So again, make sure that you save out your screenshot of this guy in its kind of final form. Ideally, save out the screenshot before you flatten everything, so everything will have its lower wireframe like this on there, and then have the alternate versions. Let's open up that real quick. So something like this would be the 3D file that I get delivered, but this with the lower wireframe would be what you do your screenshot with. And then that'll let me know that yes, you did your, in a sense, your subdivisions correctly, and then me opening up your 3D file here, I'll know that you kind of exported everything correctly. And then from here, you guys should be all set.